Our final lesson in Learning Module 2 concerns the Internet. And we're going to talk about the Internet and the World Wide Web, even though we've said previously that the World Wide Web is a part of the Internet. They are not the same thing. Now start off just talking about the way that the Internet and the World Wide Web have affected us, the way in which we work, the way we communicate, the way we entertain ourselves, we carry on our daily activities has been transformed since we have started using the Internet on a daily basis, and it is so common. Now to go back just a little bit in history as to where the Internet came from, it actually began with the Cold War, or in the Cold War era, and it was a project known as ARPANET, and it was initiated by the Pentagon. And the reason that it was created, or this network was created, that would then actually develop into the Internet, is so that we could have, as a country, communication that was uninterrupted if there was a nuclear attack. So that was the very beginnings of ARPANET. In regard to Internet basics, the Internet, of course, you all know that's a lot of people just call it the net. It's a very large and continually growing, not just a network, but it's a network of networks. So networks that are connected together for global exchange of data and information. And when I said that the World Wide Web was one part or one component of the Internet, let's look at the other parts of the Internet. The Internet has email for communication. There are news groups, there are chat rooms, there are mailing lists for information distribution, and then there is the World Wide Web. And let me say right here, the Internet is not just what we use, it's everything that goes along with it, all the network connectivity, all of those things, the hardware, the software, all of these components. And again, the World Wide Web is one of the components of the Internet. You can be on the Internet sending an email, but you're not on the World Wide Web. Now, in order to be connected to the Internet, you have to have certain things. Number one, you have to have I used to say a computer. That's not necessarily true as far as we think of a computer as a desktop or a laptop. You can have a PDA, you can have a cell phone, but you have to have a device, let's say, in order to be connected to the Internet. You have to have a modem if you actually are using a computer. You have to have a telephone or a cable connection. So again, I'm thinking in terms of on a computer, not necessarily a cell phone. You have to have the telecommunications software in order to be able to connect to the Internet. So you have to have the hardware and you have to have the software. You have to have a browser in order to allow you to view those particular documents that are posted on the web. And also you have to have an account with an ISP. Now that stands for Internet Service Provider. A prime example is AOL. There's all types of Internet service providers. And usually with an Internet service provider, a user pays a monthly fee, and the ISP then gives that particular subscriber the software to load onto the computer, and also a local phone number to call to connect to the ISP's Internet access point, which is known as the gateway. Now, we're talking about dial-up service right now, but the ISP can provide dial-up service and in that use a local phone number called a point of presence, or POP. And some of you are too young to remember this. Others will remember it. Is when the internet first came in to being for personal use, and everybody was jumping on the bandwagon and getting internet service, that you paid a certain fee, but also when you actually accessed the internet and dialed up, and everything was a dial-up connection then, there weren't, cable connections or anything like that, is that a lot of times you may not realize it, but you weren't on a local number. It was a long distance number. And some people got very addicted to getting on the internet, especially at first. They spent every waking hour on there, and they were using all this long distance time, and they would have bills of thousands and thousands of dollars. And so it became common pretty fast that the ISPs provided a local number that was the dial-up number, and basically every city had a particular number, and you would, when you loaded your telecommunications software into your computer, you would be able to designate what number you wanted to, the number you wanted to use in which to connect to the internet. Now, if you're using high-speed data transfer, you don't have to have a dial-up connection. But I do realize there are still some places that do not have high-speed internet, that all they have, and they're lucky to have it, they're grateful to have it, is dial-up. We have cable, which provides broadband or very fast service, and DSL through the phone companies. Let's look specifically at how the internet works. And when data are sent over the internet, so you hit the send button and you're sending something, or you're uploading a file that you're sending, all that information is not sent as it is. It's broken down into smaller parts called packets, and then every packet has a part of that data that's being sent, including the addresses of the one who's sending it and the intended recipient. And in a process called packet switching, there are routers along the way on the internet to determine the fastest pathway for that data to reach the desired recipient. Now, this isn't a process that, this is going to take a day or two and I'm sending it. This is going on in nanoseconds, basically. But there are routers that determine what's the fastest way and send each of these packets. They may go along a different way, and then they come together before they get to the recipient. Every computer, we talked about the address, but every computer on the network or the internet has an assigned number. It's called an IP, or Internet Protocol address. So if you're on a computer at home and you're hooked to the internet, you have an IP address. And the IP addresses are made up of numbers from 0 to 255, and they'll be divided by periods. And here's an example. This just happens to be the IP address for Georgia Perimeter College, just in case you ever wanted to know that. But everybody's IP address looks like this. Of course, the numbers would be different. So, numbers with periods in between. But if you had to type in an IP address every time you wanted to go to a particular site, it would be very, very difficult to memorize this. And so, therefore, the internet also accepts text names called domain names. And each domain name contains what's called a top-level domain or domain suffix abbreviation that indicates the type of organization that's operating the site. And most everybody's familiar with these. At the end of an address, you'll see .com, which stands for commercial, so it's a business, usually a for-profit entity. EDU is educational institution. ORG at the end means a nonprofit organization. .gov stands for the government. And there's some basic rules. I mean, you do realize that everything you read on the internet is not true. And sometimes you have to think about those things that you're reading. And the general rule of thumb, not always true, but if it has .edu, .org, .gov, it tends to be more factual than just opinion. And so sometimes those are more trusted sites than if something has .com, .net. I mean, that's not written in stone, but many times you have to look at the information and decide this, look at the source and decide whether you think that is reliable information or not. Now, when a person uses the internet for browsing the web, the domain name becomes part of what's called a URL, Uniform Resource Locator, for the desired site. And a typical URL is what you're used to typing in the address line on your browser. Typical URL, www.wallacestate.edu. Now, when you go to a website, and in this address line, this is the browser, and you've typed in www.wallacestate.edu, this is the URL. This is the address. As I mentioned a minute ago, many people will use the web and the net interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. The internet is the system of computers, storage devices, connections, the software that allow people to use the connections. And the web is a part of the internet that contains linked HTML or hypertext markup language documents. Now, in order to be viewed on the web, a document has to be written in HTML, or hypertext markup language. One thing as far as just terminology, even though you've used them a million times, as far as terminology goes, hyperlinks, when we talk about documents that are linked, hyperlinks allow for immediate jumping from one site to the next or to another site with just the click of a mouse. So if you're at wallacestate.edu, that's the URL, and you've gone to this website, in order to jump around on the website, you are a lot of times provided with hyperlinks. And when you know that you're on a hyperlink, when you hold your mouse over it, and it usually, even though you can change this and make it into different things, when you get to a hyperlink, I call it the Mickey Mouse glove, its little white hand comes up and lets you know that you're at a hyperlink. Now, in regard to navigating the web, usually a website's not just a web page. There are multiple web pages on a website, and a user can find a website by typing in the URL address in the location box on the browser. And the first page that you come to is referred to as the home page. And again, that software that allows you to explore the World Wide Web is a browser, and we've talked about that several times. And that browser interprets that HTML code and then provides a graphical interface and permits the user to browse or visit sites on the internet via those hypertext links. And so if you don't have a browser installed, you cannot navigate the internet. Most especially, you cannot navigate the web, because the browser interprets those web pages that are written in that special code. You know, another thing as far as just terminology, to find information on the web, you can simply open a browser and type the URL address in, but a lot of times you don't know the URL address, so you need to use a search engine. And all this is an online program. It finds information based on keywords typed into what is known as a query box. And in most, there's multiple search engines. Some are more popular than others, but that's if you don't know the address, because sometimes you kind of go with your instinct and say, well, it's so-and-so.com or so-and-so.this, and a lot of times you'll be wrong and you can't find it. And especially the more and more and more and more websites that there are, a lot of the addresses that you think that they may be taken by another organization, and you just get it off just a little, even with the suffix, and you put .com or .net in versus .gov, and you can get on some pretty bad sites. And so you have to be real careful. But there are a lot of search engines out there, and the most popular, Yahoo, that's a search engine. Of course, the most popular now is Google. There's Excite, that was one of the earlier ones. Webcrawler, I still use that from time to time. And to get to the search engine, you type in the search engine's URL. And so many search engines, although some are more popular than others. Google has even been made a part of our language, and everybody knows what you mean when you say, well, just go Google that. That just means use that Google search engine or do a search. Now, in regard to website content, one of the most exciting parts or aspects of the web is its capacity to deliver text, graphics, animation, audio, video, all of the multimedia that we've talked about before. But with some web content, it needs a little help, and it will require what's called a plug-in or a helper application. And many of you have probably experienced this, that you've gone to open some content, and it'll say, well, in order to do that, you need to download this. And so that's just a plug-in application or a helper application. And these programs actually enhance the capability of your browser and allow you to do certain things that you couldn't do if you didn't have these particular applications. Examples of plugins are the Adobe Reader or Acrobat Reader, that allows you to view those PDF files. Many times you'll be asked, one time, do you want to download the Reader? And you do, and it's on there. You'll notice that in this class, I'm very specific to say you have to have at least version 9 or higher with Adobe Reader or Acrobat Reader. And so you can have some older versions. I know that on some of the computers in the lab, I'll look on that, it has 5.0, and we're on 10 now or higher than that. So sometimes that's what that reader is. It's a plug-in or a helper application. Sometime in order to watch movies or clip-its, you have to have a flash player. You have to have QuickTime Player to play some movies and music and animation. There's something called a Real Player, and that allows you to play audio and streaming video. And so all of these have a purpose, and they're usually, you download them for free. And the individual who designs the website is referred to as the webmaster. And web designers typically use a file format that uses compression to reduce images to a more manageable size, because a lot of images can take up a lot of space. And we talked about this previously, about the most popular, when we were talking about graphics and images, and we talked about the extensions that you would see on them: bitmap, JPEG, GIF, TIFF. But with JPEG and GIF or GIF, just depends on who you're talking to, these are the ones that are used for compression and to make the files a lot smaller. I mentioned before, bitmap images are very good images, but they take up a lot of space. Now, in order to use images, you can go and get them anywhere. Most of you already know this, but when you, for example, if you want to, you can go get an image, although you have to worry about copyright laws and those types of things. But just by going to Microsoft, going to their site, and if you do a search for example clip art, and then you go to the images, you can get all types of clip art. To put any type of presentation or anything you want. Like I said, a lot of you are familiar with this. You can have animated clip art also, but anywhere you are, let's say on the web, and we're not in the clip art part right now. Let me see. Let's go back to the main page. For example, see where it says products from Microsoft Store, and there's some pictures here. Anytime you're on a site, if you right click on an image, you can save that picture to your computer, and you name it, and then you actually can save it on your computer. And you'll notice when it says save as type, you can choose. Sometimes you're given options. Usually if you are, I'll pick, instead of bitmap, JPEG, and it makes it a smaller file, but you can do that and then insert those pictures anywhere you want to. Said, when you're downloading pictures on the internet, make sure that you're not violating any copyright laws when you do that. But it's any of them. You can, for example, just that, where it says Bing, if you right click on it, it's actually a picture, and you just save the picture and then name it, save it on your computer, and then you can paste it into other documents. Okay, let's talk about audio on the web. Now, some sites have multimedia, as I mentioned, and have audio and video on the websites. And I wanted to mention in regard, we've already talked about MP3 files and MIDI files, but most audio files used on the internet are created using a file type called WAV. So the extension on that file would say .wav, and it stands for sound wave, or AU for audio. Now, with using streaming audio, if you've ever heard of that term, that allows the listener to hear the files as they're actually being played and transferred over the web, meaning that they don't have to be downloaded to a computer. So if you're listening to streaming audio or watching a streaming video, you're not downloading anything to your computer. It's just as you're listening to this Tegrity presentation, you're not downloading anything. This is streaming. Now, sometimes you may have some issues if your internet connection is very slow or something, but it is just streaming instead of actually requiring a download. Now, one of the most popular formats for compressing music files is called MP3, and we've already talked about that before. So that's a format, and you'll see that as the extension on the file. If it's an MP3 file, it'll say .mp3 at the end. And then with video, or video applications on the web that are much larger than audio files, so they need to be compressed also. And the compression standard for video is called MPEG. Now, with the images, we had JPEG. With actually video, it's called MPEG. And so again, you'll see that as the extension on the end of a video that's been compressed using this particular standard. And they're compressed so that when they're transmitted over the internet, that it doesn't take 1,000,000 years to do it, because some of those files can be huge. So if they're compressed, they don't take as long to transfer. For streaming video, there's something called real video software that can be used, just like we had Real Audio. That's what it was called, a Real Player for listening to audio. There's a Real Video Helper application that you can download to use to view video. You can also view video using other software applications also. When publishing to the web, said it several times, that those documents on the web have to be published in HTML in order to be read by the browser. It's not as difficult as it was in the past, where you had to purchase web authoring software and had to know quite a bit about actually programming or writing documents in this HTML or hypertext markup language. Now, there are user-friendly programs that allow the user to create websites without a lot of trouble. And since the websites have to be created using HTML, which is just a collection of codes to indicate the parts of the pages and how they're formatted and the location of links, then all of the content on those websites has to be done using the HTML. Now, the codes that you find in HTML, and I'm going to show you an example of what it looks like. These codes are called tags, and they tell the browser how to display the words and how the data should appear on the page. Now, this is just a sample, and you may not can see this. This is a Word document, and I was going to show you how easy it is, rather than having to actually again purchase web authoring software to allow you to use HTML code, that in Word you can actually do a Word document and then save it as HTML, and then you can actually view it on a browser. And so if you've typed health information, this says health information technology medical coding certificate, I just typed that on the page, and what you can do is you can actually go and save a file and save it, and when it says save as and then file type, you put HTML, or you choose HTML, and it saves it as an HTML page. You can also then view it, and I can't because this is a PowerPoint slide and not the actual document itself. But up here, there is a little page that has a globe on it and a little magnifying glass, and that's when you click that, you can actually view that in a browser rather than in Microsoft Word. And you can also view what the HTML code looks like by going through several steps, but I thought I would just show you that on that previous page where it just said health information technology, and then skipped down a line and said the medical coding certificate. If you actually view the HTML code, if you've actually saved the document in that particular format, and you actually go back and view the code, this is what HTML looks like. And so in order, all of these things are called tags, and they tell the browser how something should look. So I had that in Times New Roman font, and that's what this HTML code is telling the browser, that when health information technology is displayed, then do it in Times New Roman. This stands for a new paragraph, or anytime you skip a line. And so that's basically what HTML code looks like. As far as communication over the internet, everybody knows how to send email, hopefully. And I know you do because you've been in the Student Center in Blackboard, and there's an email function in there. So even if you've not seen any other type of email, you have within Blackboard, which is basically the same as any other type of email that you would send. And we all know that's one of the most popular internet features, and it has its advantages. It's instantaneous, where the regular mail is not. It doesn't require all parties to be free, as with telephone calls. It can be answered many times per day. It costs a lot less than, for example, overnighting a document or doing second-day mail. And it doesn't involve long-distance charges as you would incur if you were actually faxing a document. When we look at a user's email address versus that URL, which is the web address, you'll notice that email address is made up of the username and then the domain name that identifies each distinct mailbox. And so a sample email address, here's my email address at Wallace State, is my name and then at wallacestate.edu. And for some reason, and I haven't figured this one out yet, that a lot of people do get confused between a web address and an email address. And so always know that with the email address, you will have at. With a web address, you will not. So it identifies the user and then the domain name. And so always remember that signifies an email address. And when you have an ISP or a mail server, it makes the connection to the internet and holds a mailbox that's just a repository, and we keep hearing that word, just a place to put stuff for newly received mail until you've actually had a chance to go in there and view it. Sample email in Outlook, which we've talked about. And as I said, if you can send an email through Blackboard, then you ought to be able to send an email through any type of email, no matter what program you're actually using. Another component of the internet is a chat room. Some of you have been in chat rooms and you chat in real time with individuals. Most of the time it's where you type in the message. There are audio chat rooms where you can actually talk, but most of the time it's through actually typing. So in internet chat rooms, the users can participate in conversations with other people from anywhere in the world. They type their messages and then post them, and everyone in the chat room sees them. There are also, as I mentioned, even video chat rooms in addition to voice chat rooms. And here's an example of the Blackboard chat room. It says WebCT chat because that's what it used to be called. But in addition, in Blackboard now we have a whiteboard where you can actually, in the chat room, that if we had a chat going on and everybody was in the chat room, I could draw or put things on the whiteboard, and the screen is basically divided in half with the whiteboard here and the chat underneath. But for those of you, most people have visited a chat room. A lot of people have not, but you enter your message and then hit enter, and it just sends it, and everyone that has entered the chat room is listed over on the right hand side in this particular case. Sometimes they may be on the left, but it's common to have it over on the right. And there are chat rooms for everything in the world, for people with common interests, and again, you can chat with anybody around the world. There are news groups, there are message boards, and these allow for postings of messages where the readers don't have to be online at the same time, where with the chat, that's in real time, so everybody that's in the chat room is online right then at the same time. But with the message boards, think of them as like the discussion boards in Blackboard. So you leave your message, and then people can come in at another time and actually read the messages and reply to them. Now, when that does go on, that's known, if you hear the term thread, that's a threaded discussion. There's a topic, and then people come in and either post a new message about that topic or respond to someone else's postings. And then lastly, something it's not brand new, but it's relatively new, is a blog. Do you ever wonder where some of these names come from? A blog is just a blend of the term web and log, weblog. So it's a type of website or a part of a website, and they're maintained by usually individuals who just make regular entries of commentary, description, what they've done, what their opinions are on certain things, different material. They can post graphics or videos, and it's usually in chronological order, or excuse me, reverse chronological order, and so the newest entries would be at the top. And as far as definition, it's basically just an online diary where people can put whatever they want in there for other people to read. Now, in summary, we've gone over basically two things. We've defined the internet and how it works, and then also defined those different components of the internet, including the World Wide Web.